I've been researching the post-war development projects. She began carefully. There are inconsistencies. $2 million allocated for veteran housing that was never built. And Reeves, a junior clerk in accounting, he was the last person to review those files. Claire spread the blueprints across the small table, her fingers avoiding direct contact. Look at the revision dates. The original plans show low-income housing units, but then there's a series of changes, all signed off in the middle of the night. The properties were rezoned for commercial use instead. She pulled out another document. And here, the foundation specifications for Warehouse 7. They were modified at 3 a.m. the night Reeves disappeared. A deeper pour in one corner, rushed through without proper inspection. Her voice steadied as she stuck to the documentary evidence. The same night the housing project files vanished. Dr. Smith studied the papers, his expression grave. And you believe these changes are connected to Reeves's disappearance? The timing's too perfect to be coincidence. Claire chose her words carefully, trying to explain what she knew without revealing how she knew it. The warehouse foundation was poured before dawn. Reeves was never seen again. And suddenly, the Blackwood family's construction company had exclusive contracts for all the waterfront development. She paused, her hands shaking slightly. Someone else knows I was figuring it out too. Tonight, at the archives, a man came in, said he was security, but there wasn't something right about him. He had a gun. Her voice caught. He wasn't there to arrest me for staying late. Dr. Smith's expression sharpened. Are you sure you weren't followed here? I don't think so. I took side streets, doubled back. Claire wrapped her arms around herself. But he knew who I was, knew what I'd found. Someone's been watching me at the archives. She was walking a tightrope now, sharing enough to show the danger without revealing the whispers that had led her to it. The voices in the blueprints clamored to be heard, but she kept her focus on what she could prove. $2 million meant for veterans, she said softly. Enough to start an empire, if you knew how to hide it, and someone still protecting that secret. I knew about Thomas Reeves. He stood, moving to one of his many bookshelves, pulling out a thin folder, yellowed with age. The official story was that he embezzled the money himself and fled to Mexico. He was murdered, Claire said softly, catching herself before she mentioned the voices. All the evidence points to it, and now they're willing to kill again to keep it buried. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house. Dr. Smith's head snapped up. Are you sure you weren't followed? Before Claire could answer, they heard the unmistakable sound of the back door opening. The basement, Dr. Smith whispered urgently. Behind the furnace, there's a door to the old coal room. Go, now. But I'll stall them. Go. Claire clutched the blueprints to her chest and ran. Behind her, she heard Dr. Smith's calm voice. Gentlemen, this is a rather unorthodox hour for a visit. Claire huddled in the darkness of the coal room, heart pounding. Through the old heating vents, she could hear muffled voices from above. Dr. Smith's calm academic tone contrasting with deeper, more threatening voices. Professor, we know she came here. Let's keep this civil. At 2 a.m., with guns, civility seems to have already left the conversation. A crash, something heavy hitting the floor. Claire pressed her hand against her mouth to stay quiet. The blueprints in her bag felt warm, almost urgent. Without thinking, she pulled them out, fingers tracing the lines in the darkness. The voices came instantly, but different ones this time. An argument from 1947. The Hamilton family gets the waterfront properties. The Reeves problem is handled. And my father's construction company gets the contracts? Just like we agreed, Mr. Blackwood, your family's future is secured. Claire's breath caught. Blackwood, as in Senator William Blackwood, whose grandfather had built half the city. The same Blackwood family that still owned most of the waterfront development companies. Another voice from above, search the house, make sure she's not here. More footsteps. Claire looked around desperately. The coal room was a dead end, just old brick walls and a small window too high to reach. Unless the coal room should have another exit, a delivery chute that connected to the old service alley. Those bricks there, she thought to herself, they aren't as old, they weren't load-bearing. A crash from upstairs. Dr. Smith's voice, sharper now. That's a first edition. Have you thugs no respect for... The sound of a slap cut his words short. Claire felt along the wall where the chute should be. The bricks were loose, decades of moisture doing what time alone couldn't. She could feel cold air seeping through the cracks. More voices from the blueprints, overlapping now, not just from the annex, but from other buildings, the waterfront warehouses, the old courthouse, pieces clicking together, the Hamilton Blackwood Development Company. Judge Patterson signed off on the permits. Reeves's body goes in the foundation of Warehouse 7. Claire's fingers found an edge. One brick shifted, then another. The footsteps above were getting closer. Through the heating vent, a new voice. "Sir, you need to see this." Found it in his study. Paper rustling. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Well, Professor, funny that you should have these notes out tonight. The Hamilton Blackwood Conspiracy. Quite a provocative title. Who have you been talking to?" "Academic curiosity," Dr. Smith replied, his voice strained. "Nothing more. Curiosity killed Thomas Reeves all those years ago. Did you really think that I would let you and your little assistant take everything from my family, from me?" Claire froze. The voice from above, she recognized it now. Senator William Blackwood himself, the man currently running for governor. The bricks finally gave way, revealing the narrow chute. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of the alley. Above, she heard Dr. Smith laugh, a harsh, bitter sound she'd never heard from him before. "Family? Is that what you call it? 3 generations of corruption, built on stolen money and murdered whistleblowers? My grandfather made this city what it is. Your grandfather buried Thomas Reeves in Warehouse 7's foundation. How many other bodies are buried under the Blackwood family empire?" Through the heating vents, Senator Blackwood's voice hardened. "You're a fool, Smith. All these years studying the past, never understanding how the present works. Some stories need to stay buried. Like how your family's waterfront development started with stolen federal funds." Dr. Smith's voice was steady now, almost taunting. "Or how every major construction project since 1947 has gone through Blackwood companies. Progress has a price. And Thomas Reeves paid it." A sharp crack, another slap, maybe worse. Claire winced at Dr. Smith's muffled grunt of pain. The chute was clear now, but she couldn't leave him. Not after he'd protected her. Not with the truth so close. She touched the blueprints again, desperate for more. The paper felt hot now, almost burning. Images and voices flooded her mind. A late-night meeting in the annex. Thomas Reeves, young and earnest, confronting old man Blackwood. These funds were meant for veteran housing, not private development. I won't sign off on this. The sound of a scuffle, a gunshot. Then, get the contractor. Tell him there's a change to the Warehouse 7 foundation plans. Tonight? Claire's hands shook as she pulled out the warehouse blueprints. There, in the foundation details, a last-minute revision. A deeper pour in one corner, signed off by the city inspector at 3 a.m. The perfect place to bury secrets. Above, furniture crashed. "Search her car," Blackwood ordered. "The blueprints have to be here somewhere. And Smith, you should have taken the retirement offer. Could have died peacefully in your sleep like Judge Patterson last month." "The judge," Dr. Smith's laugh was wet, pained. "Let me guess. He finally grew a conscience about all those property decisions he rubber-stamped." "Conscience is a luxury, Professor, one this city can't afford, not with the new development plans." Blackwood's voice grew closer to the vent. "The waterfront is about to change forever. Billions in contracts, all through the proper channels this time. No more messy loose ends." Claire looked at the blueprints in her hands. Not just evidence of an old murder, but proof of decades of corruption. The foundation of an empire built on blood and stolen money. And now, with the new development plans, she heard footsteps on the basement stairs. A choice then. Run with the evidence or try to save Dr. Smith. The chute beckoned, promising escape. But the truth had already cost too many lives. Claire touched the blueprints one last time, not seeking voices now, but memorizing details. Then she did something she'd been taught never to do to historical documents. She ripped them into pieces. When the basement door burst open, she was waiting. Light flooded the coal room, revealing Claire surrounded by scattered blueprint fragments. "Looking for these?" She held up a piece showing the Warehouse 7 foundation. "I've got copies of everything, sent to multiple sources an hour ago. Kill us, and it all goes public." A lie, But in the dim light, with fragments of blueprints scattered around her, who could tell? Blackwood's face appeared in the doorway, lined with fury and something else. Fear. "You're bluffing. Try me." Claire's voice was steadier than she felt. "Your grandfather buried his secrets in concrete. You hide yours in offshore accounts and shell companies. But it all leads back to that night in 1947, to Thomas Reeves and $2 million that built your family's empire. You have no proof." "Don't I?" She pointed to the blueprints. "Every building tells a story, Senator. And I've learned to listen." Blackwood stepped into the coal room, hands open in a gesture of false peace. "Ms. Winters, be reasonable. The city needs stability, progress. The developments we're planning will create thousands of jobs. Like the veteran housing that was supposed to be built in 1947, Claire kicked a blueprint fragment toward him. "Thomas Reeves was reasonable too. Look where that got him." Times were different then. Blackwood's smile was practiced, political. "My grandfather was heavy-handed, but today we do things properly. Judge Patterson might disagree. If he hadn't died in his sleep last month." Claire watched his smile falter. "How many others, Senator? How many accidents and convenient heart attacks?" A noise from upstairs. Dr. Smith's voice raised in argument, followed by the sound of breaking glass. "Last chance," Blackwood said softly. "Walk away. A research position at Harvard. Full funding. A fresh start away from all this unpleasantness." Claire knelt, touching a fragment of blueprint. The paper burned under her fingers, voices rushing in. "Please, I have a family." "The hole we are going to put you in is going to be deep. No one will ever find you." She looked up at Blackwood. "Your grandfather's voice. He said those exact words to Thomas Reeves, right before—" Something shifted in Blackwood's expression. The politician vanished, replaced by something curious but cold. He moved closer, stepping on blueprint fragments. "Fascinating. Some sort of post-cognition. I almost wish we could study this ability of yours. But—" A gunshot cracked above them. Then silence. "Dr. Smith!" Claire started for the stairs, but Blackwood's hand clamped on her arm. "He chose his path, like Reeves did, like you're choosing now." His grip tightened. "Some stories need to stay buried, Ms. Winters, along with the people who try to tell them." Claire's free hand found another blueprint piece. The paper seared her palm, but she held on. The voices came stronger now, not just from 1947, but from every year since. Decades of secrets, of whispered meetings and muffled screams. Every building that had witnessed the Blackwood family's rise to power had a story to tell. And in that moment, Claire understood. She wasn't just hearing the past. She was its voice. She pressed the paper harder, letting the voices flow through her. When she spoke, it wasn't just her voice. It was Thomas Reeves, Judge Patterson, every victim of the Blackwood Empire. "Tell them, William," she said, their voices overlapping with hers. "Tell them about the bodies under the foundations, the bribes in the walls, the blood in the concrete." Blackwood stumbled back. "What are you—" "Your grandfather's words echo in every building he touched." Claire advanced, the blueprint fragments swirling around her feet. "The judge's last conversation plays on repeat in his chambers, and right now, upstairs, Dr. Smith's study is recording everything, every confession, every threat." She was bluffing mostly, but in the dim light, with decades of voices speaking through her, how could he be sure? "You're insane," Blackwood whispered, but his confidence was cracking. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. "That's impossible," he said. "No one knew." "The buildings knew." Claire held up another fragment. "They remember everything, Senator, and now they're telling their stories." The sirens were very close now. Through the coal room's tiny window, red and blue lights painted the alley walls. "This isn't over," Blackwood snarled, backing toward the stairs. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Neither do you." Claire's voice was quiet now, but carried the weight of decades. "Run for governor, Senator. Run for president. But remember, every room you enter, every building you hide in, they're all listening now. And so am I." The basement door burst open. Police flooded down the stairs, Doctor, Chen's voice guiding them. "Down here! Quickly!" In the chaos that followed, Claire clutched the blueprint fragments, feeling them pulse like living things in her hands. The voices were quieter now, but still there, still waiting. Some stories refuse to stay buried. They wait in the walls, in the foundations, in the spaces between then and now. All they need is someone to listen. And Claire? She had learned to listen very well indeed. A month later, Claire sat at her desk in the archives, a fresh stack of blueprints beside her. The morning paper lay open to a headline. Senator Blackwood withdraws from governor's race amid investigation. Below that, a smaller headline. Historic warehouse, 7 to be demolished. Human remains found in foundation. Dr. Smith was back teaching, sporting a small scar above his eye that he claimed made him look more distinguished. He'd started a special research project on urban development history, with Claire as his assistant. They had a lot of buildings to listen to. The police had found enough evidence in Warehouse 7 to open a dozen investigations. Old cases were being reopened, suspicious deaths re-examined. The Blackwood Empire was crumbling, one exposed secret at a time. Claire picked up a blueprint, plans for a new community center on the waterfront. For the first time since 1947, the contract hadn't gone to a Blackwood company. She touched the paper gently, letting its future whisper to her. The voices were different now. Children laughing, community meetings, the sounds of a city healing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Smith. Found more files from 47. Come by when you can. Bring coffee. Claire smiled, gathering her things. The archives didn't feel so dark anymore, even in the basement. Maybe because the secrets they held weren't staying buried. Or maybe because she'd finally learned what her grandmother used to say. Every building has a story, if you know how to listen. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she locked up. But now they seemed less like they were fighting the shadows, and more like they were keeping watch. After all, in a city full of old buildings and older secrets, someone had to be there to hear their stories. And Claire, she would be listening for a long time to come.
Thank you for sticking around and listening to the whole story. I hope you enjoyed it. I imagine if you stuck around as long as you have, you probably have some feelings about the story. I would love to hear them in the comments, good or bad, doesn't matter. I want to hear them. If you enjoyed the story, please like and share it with some people that think you might enjoy it. And don't forget to subscribe. You all have a good day. I'll catch you here next time.